Welcome everyone to another episode of Reimagining Cyber. Rob here with Stan. And Stan, before we jump in, we've got a little rivalry between you and I. You being focused on your Dallas Mavericks, me and my Boston Celtics, right? We got game 3 tonight as we release today's episode. And let me just clarify, because people like our producer Ben need to understand that we're talking about the National Basketball Association, the NBA. Michael Jordan came from there, right? So that's what we're talking about, Ben. But anyhow, the Boston Celtics are up 2-0 on the Dallas Mavericks, and they're back in Dallas, Stan. So this is where I get a little nervous. What do you think?
You should be nervous. Luka's going to start up, man. The threes are going to start falling. It's been painful to watch. I mean, we were spanked. Dallas was spanked in the first game, and I really thought that after we got the lead in the first quarter and the second game, it's like, all right, it's going to be different. This is it.
Yeah.
And, you have some players. The Celtics.
That's the big, aspect of this team. It's truly a team. They don't talk about, one player, singled out. It's truly they work well together. So anyways, enough about that. On to our topic of the day. And Stan, an interesting topic came up back in April. I was at an event, a CISO event specifically, and we had this little sidebar conversation going, myself and 3 other CISOs, combination of former CISOs. One actually is now a CTO. The topic of transitioning from a CISO role to a CTO role came up. Again, one of them had gone through that transition. And just a week or 2 ago, I came across an article on Dark Reading that was talking about this very topic. It was becoming more prominent. So I thought, maybe we could kind of discuss it because, a lot of the conversations we've had with different guests over the years really have been about the role of the CISO, but that connection point of coming from a kind of foundation in technology and transitioning to understand the impact of the business side of it. And I think that's really one of the kind of aspects or key aspects that sets the foundation for what is desired in that transition potentially to the role of the CTO. So wanted to talk a little bit about that. There's been some examples out there recently of CISOs from organizations such as Bank of America, Fifth Third Bank, Equifax most recently as well, where the CISO has actually now transitioned into that role of the CTO for those organizations. And so let's kind of just discuss, maybe some of the different attributes that we see that connects the dots between the two of them. And I'll start with, I think a lot of the aspect of collaboration is important and understanding how you connect with the different stakeholders across the business, right? So from the role of the CTO, they're driving new innovation. They're driving, increased revenue. And so they need to understand, again, what's the business desire from them to develop these new solutions and bring them to market.
And many times, let's face it, the CISOs are trying to close gaps and as far as their security controls, and they have to work with the broader ecosystem within the organization to get this to happen, right? So they have to collaborate. They have to work well in the sandbox.
Exactly. So very similar, again, right, in that regard, where they're working with the different functions and stakeholders out there in different parts of the business. So I think that's another key, really, attribute, strategic thinking. How are they going to really start thinking about bringing these solutions forward? There's the whole mindset of the CTO kind of driving, creation of value, the CISO protecting that value for the organization. But they do cross over quite a bit. They work with them, each other quite frequently as well. So maybe we kind of delve a little bit into the why. Why do we potentially start seeing this bit of a trend happening out there in the marketplace?
I think, as far as, again, some of our audience are those folks that are in the CISO role. And so this is probably a good topic anyway, because it helps with it. Why would they potentially want to go into a CTO role as they're looking at professional growth? And part of the reasons, I think, would be that a CTO has wider influence over the organization's technology strategy, beyond security, right? So, you have more influence. Going back to the skills that you're looking for, the CISO does have to have technology chops, right? That transition to also including business acumen and strategic thinking has been happening over the last 5 to 7 years as well, but it's still they have technology capabilities and understanding, and the CTO obviously has to be able to drive the business to change to a vision of some kind of new set of technologies to help meet the business needs, right? And so the fact that the CISO has some of that already and is already working with the executive level and potentially the CEO, they may see that, well, hey, this individual already has that, and they already have, a security mindset. If you think about the importance of security by design and the
Right.
need to integrate security into the thinking of what you're doing, whatever it is, you already have that with somebody who's been in a CISO role, and you don't have to worry about whether or not this new rollout of technology is going to be incorporating security safeguards.
Yeah, and I think that's really kind of the hinge pin for all of this is that secure by design principle and the initiatives that we're pushing there. We've had guests on the past that are in the role of product security, kind of understand that they have to really embed security into the different products and services that their business is bringing to the market. But that drive of what we've seen from the White House's national cybersecurity strategy and CISA taking on and moving that forward with the Secure by Design initiative, that is, and I think a key aspect because it really helps. The core behind that is really to try to help kind of push the burden back away from the end user or consumer and back into these technology stakeholders that can obviously bear that burden of issues much easier or at a lesser risk.
I think another area of experience that both the CISO and the CTO have is, again, the CISO has that operational experience and understands the impact that a rollout of capability in many cases in the security context, you may have an impact with a WAF to an application in the production environment. And so, you have to understand those ramifications, and you've most likely been part of that change management process, and have to have the decision as to whether or not to push forward a change or not. And so I think having that broader context and understanding helps the CISO in making a case of being able to say, I can play in that bigger realm of the CTO because I also have an exposure. Now, one of the areas of weakness, I think, or potential weakness, depending on the individual, right, that the CTO is definitely doing more in the context of product or software lifecycle, right? You're actually, much more involved with the actual phases of rolling out a solution, and that may or may not be an area of strength for the CISO, depending on their background.
That's a very good point. Matter of fact, to that point, one of the people that I was having this little sidebar conversation with, their background and their strength is on application security specifically. And they've done a great job of obviously kind of, coming across and really partnering up with the development teams. Someone like that really in the other things that they've done for supporting their business with cyber behind it could fit into this CTO role pretty easily, actually, because of that experience. And to your point, understanding that aspect of the SDLC tied into, what they really need to tie into delivering products while they're still being secured is critically important.
I think they have to get up to speed on that whole, product development side of the house. And if you already were doing some of that security in so like injection into the product or software development process, then you have some of that exposure and have an understanding of how it works.
Yeah. Now, let me throw this at you. This could be a little bit of a debatable topic here. Just something to think about. We kind of had this as a little bit of that sidebar discussion, which was, is this happening because it's logical in some of these examples we've been talking about, but is there also potentially something more so behind it that is attributed towards what we've seen with, the SEC cyber ruling, for example, the risk and personal liability of the CISO in an organization? We've seen examples with the CISO tied back into SolarWinds and what was going on there. Uber, another example, right? So
are we talking about motivation for why the CISO potentially would want to change roles, but also still be at the executive table?
Absolutely. Still be executive table, but obviously be able to pull that personal liability off of their shoulders, because there's so much of that obviously out there now with especially the SEC cyber rule behind it and other examples that have been happening. So just food for thought. What do you think about that potential? That came up as something we were talking about.
I mean, that could be it, but I also think that just the day in day out pressure of that CISO role, um, independent of whether or not you're actually in higher risk of any kind of regulatory or legal ramifications. I think that over time, some people grow weary of it. And so again, looking at, well, for my professional career, where could I progress? It could potentially be like to the CRO, the chief risk officer. But if you like the technology aspect of it, and sometimes the CTOs also don't have the burden of having a lot of staff reporting to them either.
That's true.
Depending on the organization, they may be more of a big influencer and but they don't have necessarily the burden of having hundreds of people reporting to them.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the organization, right? So yeah, I think it could be that they're looking at this role of CISO as being too hot after a while, and then saying, "Hey, where else can I go now that I've actually proven myself in the organization? I like to stay here. I like to actually continue to have a seat at the table with the executives and influence." And honestly, the CTO has broader technology influence, certainly, as far as the direction of the organization and where they're going to, as far as helping support the business. I do think that, again, I mentioned, we talked about the whole product development side of the house. There are other areas that, if you think about where organizations need to be going, they need to be looking at AI, they need to be looking at data analytics and cloud. Again, those areas the CISO may have touched upon as they're trying to secure cloud environments and put guardrails down. Same thing with the use of AI potentially, but they may not have the chops to be competitive as in that CTO role unless they hone up on those domains.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a new area that we're kind of keeping an eye on. We see some examples as we touched upon. It was an interesting conversation. And then the article just kind of piqued my interest. That's why I thought, it'd be good to just kind of put that out there and let's see how this evolves. So maybe in the future, we'll pick up on someone that, we can bring on as a guest that has actually made that transition, see what that's like, some of the drivers behind that, the lessons learned after they've been in that seat for a little bit of time as well. Be interesting to kind of get their perspective.
Yeah, because I think it is anecdotal at the moment as far as this kind of transition to the CTO role. There's not a lot of statistical backup or any kind of data saying that, yeah, this is a definite trend of CISO transitioning to CTO. But to your point, you've spoken to somebody who's made that transition. We saw this article, and there are other opportunities for the CISO beyond the CTO, right? Like the CRO and other positions. But it's good to always raise this up, and I'm curious as the feedback from our audience. Again, if you're skeptical of this, or if you want to affirm what we're talking about as far as this as being a valid opportunity for the CISO, please let us know. And if you see there's a more viable path or more likely path to a different role, let us know, and we'll focus on that too.
Absolutely. Well, Stan, interesting topic. And until next time.
All right. Take care, Rob.
Hello, producer Ben here, and as Rob said earlier, Reimagining Cyber has invited a lot of guests on to talk about their role as a CISO. Back in episode 74, we highlighted some of these conversations in a special episode called The CISO, Guardian of the Digital Realm. One of those featured was Roland Cloutier, former TikTok CISO. He focused in on an issue that everybody now cares about, which is how CISOs should be looking at how to secure and ensure that artificial intelligence implementations are safe and trustworthy.
I think it's good for CISOs to look at it in two ways. The first is, if my business is going to compete and succeed in the industry we're in today, and everyone else is using AI to reduce their OpEx and adjust their margins and drive new technology to make us better than the next guy, well, I better be doing it too. The second is, my job is to defend a business and ensure the sustainability of the operations, the resiliency of the company itself, and and the security of all the things that I'm supposed to be securing. So I've got to do those things, and AI is just a faster way of doing that. And I think there are key components we need to look at. So first of all, how do I help my organization figure this out? Because a lot of them are turning to us and say, make us safe and let us use AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think the team like over at General Mills did a great job, right? And so they established clear guidelines, not hard and fast policy, but clear guidelines. And then they educated their entire company. Like their entire company, they went and said, here's how you can use AI and which.
So here are the guardrails.
Right.
And
exactly.
then ensuring that everybody understands what those guardrails are and how that potentially could then jumpstart their processes from there.
And if you don't understand it, call 1-800 help desk for AI, and we'll help you figure it out. The other thing we do is protect infrastructure. And really, AI pipelines, guys, it's just infrastructure and software. It's CI/CD on crack for AI, and it's the infrastructure that goes along with it. The 20% is the weird stuff like insertion defense and scorecard management on the compliance side. Model defense, right? That's the 20%. And by the way, there's 5 companies out there, 4 companies that are kind of doing that in the market today in any real way. And so people are getting wound up around what do I do for the 20%? Do you know where all your AI is? Do you know the infrastructure it's sitting on? Is it micro-segmented from the rest of the environment? Do you know what data is in that data infrastructure? Have you done data analysis, data defense on it? Do you know what is connecting and going out of those data stores? All right. Do you know your API infrastructure that is connected to that? And do you have the right controls and monitoring capability in place? You've got enough work for the next year or two to protect the define, segment, and protect your AI environments that will get you 80% of the way of protecting it. The rest of it, there are great partners out there. So priorities for AI, help your company be successful in embracing and understanding it. Second part of it's going to be go do our jobs on the infrastructure, data, and components that make up your AI environment.
That was Roland Cloutier, former TikTok CISO, in episode 74. And you can hear his entire interview in episode 71. Thanks for listening. Remember to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a rating and review as well. Goodbye.